Yeah, this is Words Without Intentions by James Miller in the Croatian Journal of Philosophy. Tindarius, thank you for the lurk. This is 2025 stuff, so it just came out. It was on Phil Papers behind a paywall. Yeah, okay. Sometimes we can grab them otherwise, but, save the link for next time, Vipers. Just throw it up in Discord. Yeah, so we do some little philosophy of language, I assume. As always, my first time reading it, and ask me questions along the way. Yeah, it happens, Vipers, happens. Laughing says, yeah, I was trying to find a Cybernext paper, but nobody can keep their bloody analysis under 20 pages. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So here we go. And as always, my first time reading it, I don't endorse it. Just let me know if you got questions. Metaphysics of words, oh god, yeah, it's philosophy of language. That's what's going on here. A prominent claim in the literature on the metaphysics of words is that intentions are either jointly or independently necessary or sufficient for the tokening of a word. I was like, this is why I went and looked to see if there was anything else. I was like, there are some philosophy of language people in chat. The rest of the people will be like, I'm out of here. It's like, yeah. So the whole point is that you have some intention. You mean to do something. There's something you're going on about. And when you say a word, that token is, you said that because you were going on about something, and that's why you said the word. So that token of the word you said has to do with what you were intending to talk about. Looks like an intro. Okay. Yep. But wait, there's more. All right. The idea is certainly intuitively plausible. If I say the word plant, then this is because I've intended to token that word. I intended to utter a token of the word plant, and it seems natural to think that I was able to do so because of some intention to token that word. Yeah. Update, goddammit. Thank you, Vipers. Oh, this is what happens. I've got too much crap in my head, and I can't think anymore. Darius is laughing at me, too. These are people that have been here for forever, and they're like, yeah. Words are words. Yes, Tum Tum Club, 1986. Yeah. Kaplan is perhaps most famous for holding this view. For Kaplan, intentions are necessary and sufficient for tokening of a word. If a speaker intends to use or token a word, such as plant, then whatever output they produce is just a token of that word. Yeah, so if you want to say, like, house, then you say the word house. And if you want to say it in, like, a different language, then you say the word in a different language. But the idea is that, like, you had an idea about talking about house, and then, like, if you're talking Spanish, you say casa. In English, you say house. And whatever it is in whatever language. But those are different tokens because they're in different languages. But, like, that's the whole point. As intentions are necessary for the tokening of a word, for Kaplan, it follows that if there are no intentions to utter a particular word, then that particular word cannot be uttered. As intentions are sufficient, if there are the intentions to utter a particular word, then whenever a person has the relevant intention, then the utterance is an utterance of the particular word. Received 2024, accepted a year later. Yeah, dude, Tindarios, if you look at my paper that came out over the summer, it's like that. I sent it in like a year and a half earlier. Yeah. So things can be under review in philosophy for a long time. Like, I've got a paper that's under review for 3 months. They said, oh yeah, we're going to get done with this real quick. I'm like, no, you're not. You have no idea the amount of shit I went into in my paper to talk about this stuff. Are you going to, for you to even find someone in this area, like, there's people who I'm referencing that in my paper I'm talking about that have, like, refereed for that journal and, like, published in that journal. And so it's like, okay, you're going to have to find one of those, like, handful of people that I'm talking about. It's going to take forever. It's like, yeah. Editors are people? Well, yes. But, like, these things, finding an expert in philosophy, like, that can talk about certain niche areas, not so easy. That's the problem with the whole journal system at the moment. It's not the journals themselves. It's getting competent people to be able to tell the difference between good philosophy and bad philosophy. There's only so many people that can distinguish what is good philosophy versus someone who's just, like, using the language in a similar way. So sometimes they're LLMs, yeah. And that's what you're getting now, like Kpar says. Sometimes now you're getting automated stuff, and the LLMs can't really be trusted at this point, like to be reviewers. And so it's like, you can't even tell. And the LLMs are sometimes writing papers. And then it's like, how do you distinguish between something that looks like it's good philosophy, but if you like get down to it, it's kind of a mess? It's the reviewer problem. It's real difficult. Okay. Yeah, so if you have the intention, you want to say the word plant, then you say the word plant. Hawthorne and Lepore call this the constitutive role of intentions. Quote, if someone intends to produce the word W using a prior performance, then what comes out of their mouth or from their pen is a performance of W, end quote. For reasons that I will outline very soon, some have sought to weaken this claim from Kaplan, holding that intentions are not necessary and sufficient, with variations of the view holding that intentions are necessary or sufficient for word tokening. Let us call any view that holds that intentions are necessary and or sufficient for word tokening to be an intentionalist account of word tokening. Yeah, so if you want to say a word, that's your intention. And that's what you either need or is sufficient, is enough for actually saying the word. As noted by Stoynik, both the necessary and sufficient intentions have been challenged most often through one or both of two routes. First, we might argue that there could be two indistinguishable tokens, plant and plant, or one of these tokens was created by a speaker or writer with the intention to token a word, while the other was created purely accidentally or through events that involve no human at all. Yeah, so like you can imagine that they intended to write the word plant, and then there was a glitch in the computer and it copied the word for the second time. So they meant to say it the first time, but the second time is really a computer glitch. And so there was no reason for that word to show up in some other place, but it did. It is strange to think that one of these is word while the other is not, especially as there are possible scenarios in which the non-intentionally created entity could still be used to express the same meaning as the intentionally created entity. Intentions must therefore not be necessary to token a word. Yeah, and so there's issues in, like, say there's a mathematical proof that somehow gets written into the sand by the ocean. You know, like the ocean washes up on the shore and writes a mathematical proof in the sand. Was the theorem proved? Well, that's weird. And so there's no intention to prove anything, but like the proof is written right there. Do you need a person to see the proof for it to be proved? Like if the tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, was the theorem proved? And so these are weird things. They had the perfect opportunity to tell this paper, quote, don't you know about the bird? Bird's the word. Yeah. So this is the issue. It's like, these are weird questions. Like, what counts as a word? Does there have to be a person behind it? And like, this kind of matters nowadays for the LLMs spitting stuff out. Second, it is common to appeal to the idea that there must be some limits of what could count as a token of a word that are independent of the intentions of the speaker or writer. A mere grunt would not count as a tokening of the word plant just because I had the intention to token that word. Rather, the sound needs to sound sufficiently like other tokens of that word to count as a token of the word. It has to be suggested, for instance, that a tokening of a word must also conform to a principle of tolerance in order to count as a token of a particular word. Performance P of a word W only if it meets relevant performance standards. You know, if I say plant and you can't understand what I'm saying because I've got like too many marbles in my mouth, you know, did I actually say the word? Yeah. Hawthorne and Lepore therefore argue that Kaplan overstates the constitutive importance of intentions. In order for a performance to count as a performance of a word, it needs to fall within locally acceptable limits, and that whether a performance counts as tolerable does not supervene on its intrinsic features, but is instead determined by certain relational facts. Intentions are therefore not sufficient for the tokening of a word. Yeah, so I mean, it's sort of socially accepted whether you're speaking in a certain language. If I say I'm speaking English, but I'm not, you know, and everyone that does speak English is like, you're not speaking English, you know, then I might have like, you know, a brain damage or something. I think I'm speaking English, but I'm not. But like, just because I think I'm speaking it doesn't mean I am. So Stoynik, I think that's probably Una Stoynik. She's around New York. I've met her a few times. Stoynik adds a third sort of objection into the mix. Stoynik's objection is that it is implausible to posit a unique intention that both determines which expression is tokened and is transparent to the speaker. End quote. Due to considerations concerning lexical selection and the possibility of error in lexical selection. Drawing on empirical evidence, Stoynik argues that lexical selection involves the targeting of a concept which activates a lexical item, but also activates related concepts and their associated lexical items. The most active item is then selected, but this may not be the one associated with the initially selected concept. It is this process that gives rise to selection mistakes, why we might sometimes select cat even though the initially activated concept is dog, because the concept dog is related to the concept cat and its associated lexical item cat. Yeah, so this is a Freudian slip here. Or, I'm on stream, I've got too many things going on, I say the wrong word, happens all the time. Because, you've got too many things on your brain and it fucks it up. But you can imagine a Freudian slip here where you meant to say one thing, but you said your mother instead. Stoynik argues that even if we describe lexical selection as intentional, it is implausible to posit a unique intention that both determines which expression is tokened and is transparent to the speaker. End quote. We might intend to say dog, but we say cat because of the selection error. Instead, for Stoynik, what lexical item is selected is what is important to what word is tokened, but this has nothing to do with intentions, and hence intentions cannot be necessary and sufficient for tokening a word. My aim in this paper, that is the author's aim in this paper, is to introduce yet another argument that suggests that intentions cannot be necessary or sufficient for the tokening of a word. This is not because I think there is some fundamental flaw in the existing arguments against intentional views of words. I think those arguments are good arguments, though I do not agree with the positive proposals that many of those authors then put in place instead of intentionalist accounts. Rather, I propose this because of the continued influence of intentions in the literature on the metaphysics of words, and because the idea that intentions are important to tokening a word is so intuitive that even more arguments are needed to fully persuade that intentions are not a promising solution to this issue. Philosophy of language. Like 6 Kaplans? I mean, I could look it up. I'll put a little line here. Which one is it that they're talking about here? I mean, that is a good point. So Kaplan D, and it looks like a philosopher because, if they're publishing in the Aristotelian Society journals and journal philosophy, I know there's a bunch of Kaplans. Yeah, and it's Una Stoynik because there's only so many people that are going to be U Stoynik. But yeah. So, yeah, so if you want to look this person up, there you go. Where was I? I was here. All right, so the existing arguments focus on cases where either the sound or the ink pattern produced fails some additional tolerance requirement, or on cases where there is no intention present. My argument will introduce a case where there are some relevant intentions to utter a word and where the relevant person succeeds in uttering a word, but that even when this is the case, we cannot use intentions to determine what word is being tokened. And I just realized I could do something way easier. If you just go to the these websites, this is Phil Archive. You go on Phil Papers. Here you scroll down. You're gonna find where's the references? There's like references in this work. So it's David Kaplan. So like this. So you can find this is the Kaplan you want to talk about. Yeah. No, see David Kaplan, UCLA. This is a philosopher. So this guy. Oopsie. Yep. Is a famous philosopher. This is a well-known person. Like, I'm not going to be able to do name recall because, like I said, streamer brain. But, like, this was the one I was thinking of. Where was I, though? Okay. Yeah, so the author said they're going to introduce cases where there are some intentions. The case that I will use is a variant of a case recently discussed by Pavesi and Radulescu, who themselves draw on Bratman. Pavesi and Radulescu use their discussion to argue against Gricean theories that analyze meaning in terms of the complex intentions of the speaker. I do not intend to make any comment on that issue here and will focus solely on the issue of tokening a word. Imagine a society where there are two rigidly separate castes, each with its own language, each strictly unrelated to the other. The citizens speak language C, and the priests speak language P. This separation of languages is strictly enforced such that citizens and priests do not speak one another's languages. These languages are both also morphologically rich, polysynthetic. This means that in both C and P, speakers can produce highly complex word forms, and single multimorpheme forms can express what would be whole sentences in other languages. This includes, as it happens in both C and P, you can ask through uttering only a single word certain questions which, in English, can only be asked through uttering entire sentences composed of multiple words. Okay, so like, German, just push it all together. One word. A cunning citizen devises a plan to rob a monastery where both priests and citizens live and work. As part of this plan, the cunning citizen secretly learns P, having already known C. Speaking P, he disguises himself as a priest and successfully manages to get into the monastery. After grabbing various valuable artifacts, he attempts to escape through some underground passage that leads from the monastery back to the city. In the dark, though, he gets lost. Through the gloom, he sees someone approaching with no way to tell whether it is a priest or a citizen. I've heard about this sort of example before. I forget where, and it makes me nervous that I've read this paper before, but since it's a recent paper, I couldn't have read this one. But yeah. So yeah, you've got two casts of people. They don't speak each other's language, and then someone learns the other person's language, the other group's language, and then doesn't know what the person approaching is who the person approaching is. What do they do? Okay, thinking that this is his chance to get the directions he needs, and that it's too dark for anyone to know by the sight whether he is a priest or a citizen, he thinks to himself, quote, "The library and the church are close to the entrance of to the underground passage, and the same sequence of sounds happen to mean two different questions in the priest language and the citizen language. Where is the access to the library, and in what direction is the chapel, respectively? If the person approaching is a citizen, they will interpret my questions being asked in C. If the priest, they will interpret as being asked in P. As I speak both, either will give me the directions I need." Okay, so they find a way to say useful directions in both languages at the same time. Now, given that C and P happen to be morphologically rich in ways that English is not, but some natural languages are, both questions in C and P can be asked through uttering a single word. That is, in P, it is possible to ask where is the access to the library through uttering only a single word, and likewise in C, it is possible to ask in what direction is the chapel through uttering a single word. And as it happens, the single words in C and in P that express those questions happen to be the same phonetically. For ease of discussion, let's say that C is the word that C expresses in what direction is the chapel in English, and that P is the word in P, that the little p is the word in the priest language that expresses where is the access to the library in English. Yeah. Knowing all of this, as the cunning citizen is fluent in both C and P, he decides to make the relevant sounds. If the person approaching is a priest, then they will take the cunning citizen to have uttered a word P, the little p, in the priest language, and if the person approaching is a citizen, then they will take the cunning citizen to have uttered a word C in the citizen language. For ease of discussion, this is the inside of the Inside Baseball. Yes, this is you have to understand the history of 20th century philosophy, why philosophers care about this shit, and intentions. But intentions is a big deal in philosophy of mind and other related areas. And so the fact that you're getting counterexamples to intentions is significant. And if you get, I guess the hope is, because I'm on this side, I don't like a lot of intention talk. And for those here who are prof fans, this is one of the things that we actually philosophically agree on. We are both sort of very anti-intention. So, yeah. Like, in this, like you wouldn't understand this unless you know a little bit about like philosophy. He's Riley and I'm Wittgensteinian, and we're very like, this is the sort of late Wittgenstein and like Gilbert Ryle sort of behaviorist streak in us. So yeah. So the abstract general form of a word, yeah. But the whole point is that if you can get to this abstract sort of like level and it still makes sense, then you don't need what the speaker's intention is. Lavin says, I do broadly follow, just laugh at the almost lack of awareness of how I'm sure this does make it easier. By no means lay language still. Yeah. And that's the issue, is that if you understand the big issues in the background here, then this matters to you. If you don't understand what's going on in the background here, then you're like, what the fuck is going on? I was waiting for that, Vipers. I was waiting for it. I'm pretty sure the priests know C and P. They have been several big investigations about it. Yeah, I've been trying not to make that joke, but it was like inevitable to come up at least at some point. So yes. I was like, I'm trying to think. Like, this guy, this author is in Durham. That's in like North Carolina. Maybe he knows it. Maybe he did that on purpose. But, you know, it's like, yeah. And granted, this the citizen and priest example is an old example, like before there was any news about priests and CNP. So, yeah. Maybe it's like these are just traditional examples in like terms, but he could have done something else. He could have. Okay. So the author continues after, you know, the cunning citizen is going to say this one sound, and whoever hears it will interpret it in their language in the right way. So the author says, this, I argue, will be the case, even though it is implausible to think that the cunning citizen has the intention to utter either the word in the citizen language or the word in the priest language. If the intentionalist account of the word tokening is correct, then to know what the word the cunning citizen tokens, we need to know his intentions. However, it would be wrong to say that the cunning citizen intends to utter the word in the citizen language, or that they intend to utter the word in the priest language. While the cunning citizen does succeed in asking a question, then they could not have intended to utter the citizen word or the priest word, since the citizen does not intend to ask about either the library or the church specifically. His intention is not specifically to know where the church is, nor is it to know specifically where the library is, as knowing where either of these would be sufficient for our cunning citizen to make good on their escape. Under the intentionalist account of the word tokening, the cunning citizen does not utter C or P. Indeed, under the intentionalist account, the cunning citizen does not utter any word, as there is no intention to utter any specific word. Yeah, so if you need to say, when I'm thinking about a word, like to say a word, you need to be thinking about that word. But this guy, he's thinking about multiple things at once. And so there is no specific word he's trying to say. He's trying to utter the sound in some sense, but that's not a word. Yeah. So this is why the intentionalist theory that says you have to utter a specific word is bunk if you're trying, like when you say that word. So, author continues, this raises a problem for the intentionalist account of word tokening, as it is also implausible to think that the cunning citizen does not token a word as whether the person approaching is a priest or a citizen. They will interpret the cunning citizen to have uttered a single word. This is a case where it seems that a word is tokened, but there is no intention to token any particular word in any language known by the speaker, as uttering either word would have worked to acquire the directions needed, and the cunning citizen did not know what language his addressee could speak. Any requirements prescribed by relevant tolerance principles are met in this case. Yeah, because apparently by definition, the words sound exactly the same when asking the questions about how to get out in both languages. Could the intentionalist respond by arguing that the cunning citizen has an intention to utter both C and P? Author says, I argue no for analogous reasons why this response also does not work in Pavesi and Radulescu's discussion of Gricean intentions. Yeah, like you could say they're doing both, but then you're just going to get muddled. I mean, they say they're not going to argue it, but like if you understand the background shit, if you intend to say that a word, then you meant to say that. If you intend to say both, then saying both is not saying a word. It gets real weird. Laffin says, yeah, I've not attempted to argue so precisely, but I'm also of the mind that intentionality is very not necessary or sufficient. Yeah. And that's the issue, is that this is not intentionality is very big, and it gets a lot of people out of a lot of problems that they don't want to solve. And so a lot of people be like, oh, don't worry about it. There's some intentional bit. It's just a feature of humans. This is just what we do. And you don't worry about it because it's just how people are. It's sort of a catch-all. It's a sort of a consciousness get out of jail free. Oh, don't worry. This is like a property of humans, and it gets them out of like explaining their theory. So, for instance, in Kripke's theory of reference, it's the causal theory of reference, and it says, look, you say a word like Napoleon, it refers to the French general. Why? Well, there was a famous guy, and your usage goes back to the history involving Napoleon. And so when you talk about Napoleon, everyone knows the history, and they know who you're talking to. The problem with that sort of thing is, say you also have a cat named Napoleon. And so are you talking about the famous French general or your cat? Well, which history is relevant? You would be like, well, that was intention. Like, you intended to pick one of the histories. So for anyone else to figure it out, they just have to know which history is relevant. But like, that's what little bit is up to you. The way we understand what we're talking about is, well, there's histories there, and that you go back on a causal history. But just like which one, like if there's any question, well, you ask the person, well, are you talking about your cat or are you talking about the French general? And that's it. And so that little bit of intentional use kind of saves a whole theory of reference and a whole lot of logic that is backed by this. So it's just an example. Laughing says, when I make art, I have an intention. To have no intention behind that, it gets sticky. It gets sticky, exactly. But like I said, people are using this because it gets them out of jail free. So it's like you think you're going to solve a lot of problems. You just be like, oh, don't worry about that one little thing. It's solved by intentions. The cunning schism could not intend to utter both words, as to intend to utter both words would involve intending to speak two languages, both the citizen and priest language. Reference theory, you mentioned that before. Yeah, I'm thinking about that in the background. I'm gonna write up a theory of reference probably next paper I write up. So it's in my head. But like how do you refer to stuff? Like, how do you do that? Well, you use names, and the names were defined on stuff. So like, in English, this is pencil, and it goes back in whatever like language history, and that's why we call it pencil. Like, it's not a crazy theory. But like, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so would they actually be intending to speak two languages? No. This would be an irrational intention, as it would put the cunning schism in danger, as being able to speak both languages is prohibited. That is, the cunning schism does not plausibly intend to say both C in the citizen language and P in the priest language, because they at most intend to say one word, in whichever language would be appropriate given the unknown language that their audience speaks. Yeah, so if they were actually intending to say the words, that would get them in legal trouble. So they could only fake like they're saying it, kind of. Library systems history method, the scope is broad. Yeah, so there's we can get into theories of reference some other time, but there's just what do you intend to be talking about, and how do you cash that out is related to this. Like, what does this guy intend to be saying when he says, well, which way to the library or which way to the chapel? So what's the reference of like the word that he's uttering at that point? Is it library or is it chapel? Like, asking the directions. So, like, yep. This is a related topic. Okay. Perhaps we can reply that the issue is about being recognized as speaking both the citizen and priest language, not actually speaking the citizen priest language, that puts the cunning citizen in danger. However, even if this is the case, we can here borrow two more points made by Pevese and Radulescu in response. First, let us suppose that instead of being questioned about the location of the library and the chapel, the single word uttered by the cunning schism were instead an order. Perhaps a certain order is needed to prove to the audience that the cunning schism is a speaker of whichever language the audience speaks. Call these words C star and P star, each a word in the citizen language star and priest language star. Now let C star in the citizen language be expressed in English as saying, bring me only a glass of champagne, and the P star and be expressed in English as saying, bring me only a glass of water. In this case, the cunning citizen cannot intend to utter both C star and P star, as these orders are contradictory. It is simply not possible to intend to ask for both only a glass of champagne and only a glass of water. This small change following Pavese and Radulescu's discussion shows that it cannot be that the cunning citizen cannot intend to utter both C star and P star, and by extension cannot intend to utter both C and P in the original case. Latvian says, I'd say it's not intentionality that solves the confusion, though. It's the context of the utterance. Again, like, the whole context here is wrapped up in this. Like, there are definitely context-sensitive theories. Like, absolutely, there's going to be context-sensitive theories. The problem is that relying on context also doesn't tell you what the active thing is. It's like, well, what are they saying? Well, it has to do with context. Okay, why'd they say that specific word in the specific time? There are multiple words that they might have said that might have been relevant, that might have been useful to their purposes. Why did they pick that one at the time when there are going to be multiple things that that could have happened in that context? It's not going to be specific enough to like say why this word as opposed to any other, which was some of the stuff that was brought up earlier, that you need the specificity. Why did you say this word at this time? Not why did you say anything relevant at that time? That's not going to get the answer. Latvian continues, not whether the utterer means their cat or the French emperor. It's whether we're talking about vet bills or French history. Yes, but again, like, if you knew that, like, what's the... I mean, are we talking about a difference, disagreement without a difference here? If, like, context or intention there, what's the context? Well, is it what you were meant to be talking about? Or, like, what's the actual thing there? Again, the context isn't going to give you the specificity required, because it's going to do the exact same work as intention. So I don't think it's going to get you out, because you're going to be able to regenerate all the problems that they were talking about intention earlier in the contextual context. Dearie. The Marshal says, meaning, context, intention, and reference. Yeah, big theory words. Yep. So, I mean, this is what the big brain nerds were, like, you know, making hay out of in the 20th century, basically. Yeah. I don't know if it got us very far. It may have. It is probably, all this stuff probably got us LLMs. And that's like all this work we put into all this shit. This is what got us our cool AIs now. Like, yeah. Because, like, being able to understand how words and linguistics and all that stuff are related to each other. I mean, between the philosophers and the linguists, probably more the linguists, and the computer scientists, like, now we have cool AIs. But, like, how does this all get put together? This is all the background theory getting us, like, how to automate language. So, yeah. True but not analytic philosophy. Yeah, so, I mean, it's a group effort. Everyone's included, continental and analytic. Okay, second is Pavese and Radulescu, I just combined their names, also discuss in their variant of the story. It is not plausible that the cunning citizen both particularly intends to say C and particularly intends to say P. Under the agglomeration for intentions principle, if S intends to phi and S intends to psi, then S is rationally required to have the conjunctive intention to phi and psi. Having the conjunctive intention would be irrational for the cunning citizen, and from this, agglomeration secures that he cannot have both particular intentions either. Pavese and Radulescu note that the agglomeration principle is controversial, but also, as is the case in their discussion, I think it is the case that we also directly intuit that the cunning citizen does not have the particular intention to utter the word in the citizen language, nor has a particular intention to utter the word in the priest language, meaning that the argument here, again, as is also the case for Pavese and Radulescu, does not rest solely on the possibility of the agglomeration principle. It simply is not the case that the cunning system only has the particular intention to utter C or the particular intention to utter P, as to have only one of those particular intentions would be irrational in the circumstances of the thought experiment. Another issue with the conjunctive intension response, more specific to the case of words, is that it is also unclear whether or not the cunning citizen can intend to utter both C and P, because if this were the case, then they would token both words, and it is not clear that two words can be tokened by a single utterance. Take a pun. Hey, what's up, Good Right Hook? Take a pun, like two fish were in a tank, and so they shoot you in the tank, like they shot you. So in that case, like that, like old punny joke, it's you've got the word tank has two meanings: the fish tank and then like the military vehicle with a gun on it. So the speaker of the pun intends both meanings, but they're only they know that when someone listens, they only token one of them, or they get confused. So I wonder what exactly is going on there. Good Right Hook. Semantics. Were we talking about semantics? Semantics. Not an argument, not a debate. We're talking about semantics. Yeah, exactly. Not the game we love to play, but semantics. Yeah. So it's the tax for our sins. Yes, Vipers. The king is never a subject from the movie Malice. Ah, fun. Okay, so it is not clear that two words can be tokened by a single utterance, but the author says, perhaps this is possible. I should have read the next line. However, it is certainly standard in the current literature and the metaphysics of words to hold that a token is a token of one word. It's a type, yeah. In discussion of puns, yes, I should have kept going. Miller, in the discussion of puns, I linked this common assumption to the idea that words are like species. And just as a particular animal can, so Miller, so this is, they refer to themselves as I here, so maybe you don't normally see that when they refer to something else they wrote in the first person, because usually journals cut that out. Maybe they put it in afterwards. Yeah. Well, thank you for the Good Right Hook. I hope you're doing well. I like this common assumption to the idea that words are like species, and just as a particular animal can only be a token of a single species, so too a token word can only be a token of a single word or type. This last point is not a knockdown argument, however it does suggest that for the intentionalist to respond by holding that the cunning citizen intends to and does utter both words require rejecting a common assumption in the literature present in both intentionalist and non-intentionalist views currently. K-Par says, to be fair, I prefer it. The passive voice about yourself reads weird. Yeah. So, this is one of the problems in the peer review system, is that sometimes it does read better and it makes more sense to talk about your own views when writing philosophy. And you can't do that because it looks kind of like, well, if you're a famous person, it kind of be like, well, I'm the famous person, you should publish my paper. And generally they don't like that. You're supposed to like get by on your merits alone, but of course people know ways around these things, but that's a different issue. But once it's accepted, you can go back and fix it and make it sound better, but there's issues with that too. Another possible response would be to deny that the cunning citizen utters any word. This is what I was thinking. They intended to utter a sound that sounded like both words. A first reading of this response would amount to the claim that he only made mere noises, and we would explain what happens through considering the idea that the approaching stranger wrongly assumes that the cunning citizen has some appropriate intention to utter C or P. Thus, the cunning citizen does not token any word, but communication happens because the approaching stranger assumes that they have. Hi, Lumpy. How you been? Hope you're doing well. Give Lumpy a shout out. The Lumpy. If you guys don't know our buddy Lumpy Dragon Potato, he's a research chemist and interesting guy, and does Minecraft streams. He's building Fantasy World, Fanreal, and it's real cool. Does some architecture and stuff. Yanny or Laurel? I don't know that question. Sorry. Yeah. But yeah, give Lumpy a follow if you haven't. Or was I? You got your toenail surgery. Oh, good. I hope your foot's feeling better then. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, you were telling me about that not too long ago. I forgot. Went well, but now it's thawing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. K-Par says, oh, and it hurt? Oh, that stinks. Yeah, I mean, I had to go get cut up once in the anesthesia, and my hand didn't take. It was painful. It sucked. K-Par says, I don't know if they addressed it, but most linguists say information is carried in phonemes as a token rather than the word. Subsyllable sounds that tell you things like singular, plural, tense, stress. Yeah, they didn't go into that here, K-Pars. This is a very philosophy-oriented paper. I don't think this is really for the linguists. It should still apply, of course, but they're not going into that stuff. Granted, the overarching linguistic and philosophical theories have to be in agreement. I mean, the philosophers aren't being like jerks about this and be like, you have to listen to us, like to the scientists. Usually they are, but the philosophers are talking about, well, does this count as a, like, does the intent, how does the intention matter to the tokening? And if they don't get it exactly, they're not being as careful as the linguists are. Usually it's not a big deal, but like, yeah. Oh, it's the famous ambiguous sound experiment. What word do you hear? Kind of like that dress picture. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I've heard. You see, the funny thing, Vipers, is like when reading it, like it completely loses it. You need to hear that like Yanni or Laurel sound very similar. Yeah, yeah. Lumpy says the doctor burned the nail growing cells with pure phenol. It was reeking, and I asked if she was not worried about the toxicity of phenol. Yeah, well, comes with the job sometimes. They're like, nah, it's fine. Yeah, so if I take it, that's the sounds. Yeah, yep. Okay, this response could work. Yeah, so you're saying one thing, you're just making a sound that you don't intend anything. If we accept it here, then it's unclear why we should not also hold that a similar situation is occurring regularly, including even in the writing of this paper. Perhaps I do not, in fact, intend to utter any word when I was writing this paper, and any communicative success is due to you, the reader, assuming that I do have the intention to utter some words. This strikes me as implausible in the case of this paper, and just as implausible in the case of the cunning citizen. Yeah, you'd have to make some sort of distinction between why sometimes you intend to mean the exact word and other times you're just making a sound. Lumpy, you fetched the safety data sheet online when she operated. There is a named neurotoxicity associated with the usage of phenolic marmasm. Interesting. She was like, what? Oh, man. It's like, well, look at Lumpy doing God's work, trying to save the doctor's health. Good for you. K-Par says calling marasm. Okay. K-Par says calling out from the Scatman's world. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, a lot of stupid shit out there. This is one of them. Like the doctor doesn't know how she was drop dead gorgeous too. Oh. Dude, I once had the most gorgeous doctor when I was very sick, and I was just like, man, is this the angel of death coming to fetch me? It's like, nah. Like, yeah. It's always fun to meet people like that. You're just like, you've got too many things going for you. You're a doctor and you're gorgeous. It's like, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're recuperating. Any other fun stories, let me know. That's a fun story. Furthermore, the thought experiment assumes that the cunning citizen does not intend to utter a word. The relevant point is that it is unclear that the cunning citizen intends to utter some specific word, meaning that the intentionalist does not have the means to say what the word is tokened. What word is tokened, excuse me. Denying that in this case that there is no word uttered would force the intentionalist into a strange position wherein, on their view, the intention to utter the word is necessary and or sufficient to token the word, but it is not the case that the intention to utter any word is necessary and or sufficient to token the type or kind of word, a kind word. Lumpy says, like, right, like give me a Gollum level surgeon to have the cosmic justice balance. Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing. It's, I mean, I'm in the New York area. People here, I've been told this from people from other areas, that like they come here and people are better looking in New York. I think it's just because there's a lot of people, so there's more competition. You have to look good. And like I remember I was in one hospital, I was like, damn, all the nurses are fucking gorgeous here. They're just really hot. I'm just like sitting there like, I was not feeling well. I'm just like, man, this stinks being sick. But like, oh God. But like, yeah, then you get your like the crazy doctors. Sometimes they're like, they're trolls. They are. Some of them are trolls. So. And not in the fun way. They're just ugly trolls. Sir, it's the morphine talking. Yeah, that also happens. You lose your mind if you're in the hospital too long. It is unclear why... Continuing the paper. It is unclear why we should think this is the case. Yeah, like if you say a word, you can't, then you might intend to make that sound in that word, but then if you try to separate it out, that you're not saying any type of word because you're saying multiple individual words, then that also doesn't make sense because you also mean to say the type of thing that you're actually saying. It's unclear why we should think this is the case. Why is it that intentions are necessary and are sufficient for the tokening of a particular word type, but are not necessary and or sufficient for tokening of the type word? Yeah. Tilapy says, plus they are taking care of you so they appear sexier than they may really be. No, I'm not that delusional. I mean, it does help that they're taking care of me, but nope, they were very pretty. It does help though. No, you want to know why I said that of that doctor I thought was so gorgeous when I was very sick? Because I went back and I saw her later and she was just as gorgeous. Yeah. So, I was not wrong. Okay, I am not suggesting that this combination of views is incoherent, though see some discussion in Miller forthcoming, but it certainly raises a broader point about intentionalism, that there is presumably some connection between the intention to utter a word and the intention to utter some specific word, and the case of the cunning citizen puts some pressure on what that relation actually is. Yeah, so, oh wait, that's the Florence Nightingale effect, right, Lumpy? Where it's like you fall in love with your nurse. Yeah. Could the intentionalist instead hold that while a cunning citizen does utter a word, they do not utter any specific word, and this is the case because while there is the intention to utter a word, there is no intention to utter a specific word? Unfortunately, this too seems to be an unattractive response. This is because it would mean that we must accept the possibility that we can utter a token of the type or kind word without tokening some specific word type. This is, I think, simply metaphysically impossible. Just as some object cannot have a property of being red without being some specific shade of red, for something to be a word is a determinable property that must have a determinate property. Some object cannot be a word without being a token of some word type. Pending some argument from the intentionalist that we have a word that is not a token of some word type, the intentionalist cannot argue that no word is uttered by the cunning citizen. She died at 90. Wow. I bet she was still batty at 90 too. That's funny. Yeah. I haven't been to like a... Yeah, I need to go to a doctor and get back to my doctors. I haven't been in a bit. Stuff for next year. Okay. A reader here might worry that the above undermines the thought experiment that I have introduced. After all, I've above suggested that the cunning citizen does have the intention to utter a word, but lacks the intention to utter a specific word. Now I'm criticizing the intentionalist because I'm arguing that we cannot utter a word without uttering a specific word. However, we should remember that my aim is to argue against the intentionalist account of word tokening. My own view is that the cunning citizen does utter a token of a particular word, but what I think the right view of the word tokening is irrelevant here, as my aim is to argue against the intentionalist. Okay, so they're keeping it secret. They've got an idea and they're not telling us. That's very mean of them. The problem for the intentionalist, if I am right, is that we should accept that a word token is uttered, but the intentionalist cannot tell us which word the token is a token of. The question is not whether or not a word tokened is uttered, but that it is unclear what word that token is a token of, indicating that intentions cannot be necessary and or sufficient for the tokening of a word. Yeah, so the whole point here is that it can't rely on intentions. It just can't. There's all these counterexamples. Now, what the right answer is, I'll tell you in my forthcoming paper, but you'll see. The intentional stance is very difficult to maintain. Okay, yet another response might be that the cunning citizen intends to utter an ambiguous word. That is, the citizen does not intend to utter the C in the citizen's language or utter P in the priest's language, but intends to utter X, which can be taken to be a token of some further word. I find this response especially unconvincing. It would force the intentionalist to posit this new word X, and it would be unclear which language C or P that X is a word of. This is a significant ontological cost, and one that could lead to even further ontological costs once we allow that other speakers may also intend to speak such ambiguous words. Perhaps the words in this paper are not actually words in English, because I intend to write ambiguous words, and those ambiguous words are not English words, or at least it is not clear that they are. Is Donald Davidson an intentionalist? I have no idea, DeMarshall. I don't know his views on language. Now, is he a mental intentionalist? Maybe. I don't know either. This might be something you could like search the internet for, like even maybe the AIs could pick this up, because he wrote enough and I don't know where to look, but like maybe you could figure that one out by searching the internet. I think because he was such a thoroughgoing scientific style naturalist about these things, that he probably was, because it does play very nice with sort of like the scientific worldview. You sort of like, okay, the only stuff going on is like a computer, and you know, you can like, if you were able to like figure out all the stuff, it would just be just algorithms or whatever, sciencey things. And then you could say, okay, what's it doing? Well, the brain is set up in a certain way to intend stuff, and that's what it's doing. It's just a intentional feedback loop. And that would play very nice with sort of the Donald Davidson picture of the world, that there's nothing particularly special going on in our mind. It's just you have to have this sort of like intentional feedback loop. You intend to do something, you get information back that changes your intention about the next thing you want to do. So I would suspect yes, but that's just speculation. Okay. Continuing. Furthermore, this response would allow us to create new words far too easily. Simply by intending to utter an ambiguous word, the cunning system has created a new word. It must be a new word as the intention is different. The cunning system does not intend to utter C or intend to utter P, but intends to utter X, and hence under the intentionalist view, they have uttered X and not C or P. This strikes me as clearly implausible. We cannot simply create new words in this way. Indeed, more developed forms of intentionalism, such as Stoynic 2022, build in restrictions that prevent this sort of highly personalized word creation, meaning that this response to my argument in this paper would be limited in that it would only work if the intentionalist were accepting a simpler form of intentionalism, one that Stoynic provides good reason to reject. Allowing the cunning system to utter a new ambiguous word would mean that creating a new word would be exceptionally easy and hence highly ontologically costly for the view. For example, this response would mean that we could not rule out that my next utterance of dog does not really mean an utterance of dog, because I have the intention to utter a new ambiguous word. If I keep on intending that each word I utter is similarly ambiguous, we would very quickly arrive at a view that has to accept far more words than I take anyone is willing to accept. Yeah, if you just want to like make up all your words have multiple meanings, then you have just like doubled all your words, and like that's a little nuts. You're allowed to define things as you please, but it's a stupid view in terms of like wider language. For completeness, we can also consider another response that Pavese and Radulescu mention. Capar says, can words that don't exist have intention? Well, the idea under the intentionalist stuff. Oh, so there's things like Capar's. Like if you think of the Jabberwocky poem by Lewis Carroll, he was specifically playing on this. So you say like a mimble and like borrow grove and all these words that don't exist, although we now sometimes use them. The issue with that is that they sound like other words that do have intention. So those words don't exist, or you write stuff down that looks like a word, but it's not a word in any English dictionary, but it also feels like they have intention because they kind of sound like a bunch of other words that have certain meanings, and so it feels like certain words have sort of feelings and intentions going with them. So you can sort of parasite on other things with like new words, and so like, you know, the great poets, like if you get like a Shakespeare or a Lewis Carroll, who's a philosophical logician, Dodgson, by the way, if anyone doesn't know. The intention, again, is a human characteristic. We have intentions. We use the intentions to like give the words meaning under those theories. So it's like you can kind of imbue words or non-real words with intention by using them in certain ways. And so it's like, yes, in some sense. But again, it's because we are the ones who control the intention or use the intention, then we give that to the new words that didn't exist before until we used them. Okay. All right. Perhaps the cunning citizen has a disjunctive intention. He intends to utter either C or P. However, when considering the issue of word tokening, this response is particularly weak. The central intuition behind the intentionalist account of word tokening is that if I intend to utter a word, then my utterance is a tokening of that word. Words are individuated by the intentions of speakers to utter tokens of that particular word. The word cat, for instance, is individuated from the word plant by the fact that the tokens of cat are products of the intentions to produce the tokens of cat, or that is a distinct intention than the one to token the word plant. It is this individuation by intention that allows intentionalist accounts to handle cases where speakers misspeak or produce tokens that do not conform to other expectations speakers have about tokens of that word. K-Part says, yeah, that tracks, but the meaning we read into it comes from that expectation of those sounds. It's hard to parse. Yes. But again, someone who's good at what they're doing, like Lewis Carroll or Shakespeare, they can do that because they're good at what they're good at language, and so they can marshal sort of like the listener's understanding of the English language to get them to have the right sort of intention, even though it's not connected to those words because they're made up words. Made up sounds even. Okay. Holding that the cunning citizen has a disjunctive intention would undermine this core claim within the intentionalist account of word tokening, as we could no longer use intentions to individuate words. This same issue also rules out a variation of this response for the intentionalist. The intentionalist might hold that the cunning citizen intends to utter either C or P, depending on the audience. This could then be made more precise by saying that the cunning citizen has a conditional intention to utter C, if the audience speaks C, and P if the audience speaks P. If words are individuated by the intentions of the speaker to utter tokens of that word, and if the cunning citizen has this counterfactual intention, then it would not seem that they are genuinely uttering C or P. Rather, it would suggest that they are uttering some third word, which is individuated by the intention of the uttering C if the audience speaks C, and P if the audience speaks P. Again, this counterfactual intention would undermine the core claim of the intentionalist account of words. Yeah. So again, if you're trying to individuate what you're saying by the intention, then you can't say two things at once. It just doesn't work. Where does this leave us? What are we going to do? The case of the cunning citizen appears to provide a new argument against using intentions to explain how words are tokened. Unlike previous arguments against intentionalist views, the case of the cunning citizen does not deny that some intentions are present, nor does it rely on cases where our intentions are that no word is uttered. The cunning citizen certainly intends to utter a word and is successful in uttering a word, but he does not intend to utter any particular word, and for that reason, if we accept the intentionalist account of word tokening, we cannot say what word has been tokened in this case. This is the case because, for the intentionalist, what secures that I utter a token of word W is that I intend to utter a token of word W. It is the particular intention to utter a specific word that is missing in this case, and hence the intentionalist cannot say what word is tokened. I suggest that this therefore provides another reason to reject intentionalist accounts of word tokening. Oh, Lumpy, if you're still here, I was saying this earlier, but there is a ridiculously priced apartment that came available this week in New York. And if it's as it is described, I don't even believe it. It's too good to be true. But like if it's as described, I might put a bid out on it. But it's too good to be true. It's ridiculous. So it's literally probably a third of what it should be like listed as. But hey, who knows? Maybe half, but closer to a third. We'll see. Okay. What the case of the cunning citizen does not do is to build a more positive view about what it is that does individuate words. Indeed, the case might even be equally problematic for some other views. For example, the case would also suggest that shape cannot individuate words, because if it did, we would have to hold that the cunning citizen is uttering both C and P, and also that in more mundane cases, whenever we utter a word of a particular shape, we also are uttering any homonym of that word. This, I take it, is an unattractive consequence. When I say I tied the bow, we do not think that I uttered a token of multiple different types, all of which just happen to be spelt and in some accounts pronounced the same way. So I guess the bow, I tied the bow, I tied the bow. Yeah, so yeah, who knows. My aim in this paper, though, is not to solve this sort of puzzle. I have argued elsewhere for my own preferred ontology, but the aim of this paper is purely critical. The cunning citizen case provides a new reason to reject intentionalist accounts of word tokening. Okay, and that's that. Okay, if anyone still remains after have some little philosophy of language, this is the rating section. Now you get to rate the paper. So if you you can see them below you. If you do not see them in your chat, it's better TTV emote so everyone can use them. If you thought this was a fun paper and made your brain dance, give it a brain dance. Fun ideas. Nog Scream, existential artistic drama, you give it a Nog Scream. An Ouroboros, a Nog Oro for deeper ancient ideas. Nog Knife, slicing and dicing arguments. Nog Navel, navel gazing only for academics. Nog Turd, all style no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also give it a global, use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch. And also my vote meh. Note, I do calculate an overall score. All the emotes in the green make the score go up. Everything in the red makes it go down. And the vote meh makes it go everything to the middle. Yeah, so I wonder why that vote meh didn't work the second time. Maybe you need a space between the first meh and the second meh. But I'll fix that. Only one meh typo. Okay. Thank you for rating for the, gave me a demarcher, got a scream. Laughing gave a yay, meh, and a scream. K-Pars gives it a dance and a meh. Yeah, okay. What am I going to say? You know, again, I know a lot of this stuff. It's good. It's not bad. I'm going to give a knife and a navel gazing because this is very much you have to know. I think I was trying to do a little bit more explaining this entire paper because you need the background to know why any of this matters. Otherwise, it just comes off as well, who cares sort of thing. The second V wasn't capitalized. Aha. There we go. So yes. Yeah, spelling and capitalization do matter here. I quite often say that. Also, I've read stuff in this area, so this really just feels like, author had some additional arguments to pile on. No big deal. Not a bad paper, but then again, nothing crazy about this. I'm just going to give him another Nog Knife, I feel like. It's nothing, the cunning citizen style argument. I've seen this, and I actually think I might have read one of these, the Pavese Radulescu papers on stream before. And so I've heard this argumentation. See what it says. Yeah. See, this is an analysis paper from 2023. I bet I read this. On stream. And so this clever, the clever example here, I have already heard this example. So it's not new to me. You got a mess streak. I feel like, Tindaris, that's not your fault. I feel like we've read a bunch of decent but not great papers lately. Yeah. So the fact that you're I feel like that's not inaccurate. The fact that Latvian Jesus gave it a meh and a yay, it's I feel like that too. It's it's not a bad paper. It's a good paper. I don't think, but I mean, again, they also didn't bite off very much. They said, I'm going to give arguments against this theory. They gave their arguments against the theory. I think they did it in a reasonably clear fashion. And that's all they did. But it's they said also, I'm not going to give you my answer. I'm going to have another paper forthcoming on that. So it's fine. Still better than nay. Yeah, exactly. It's an okay paper. It really is. And if you are interested in this area and you might have had some intentionalist leanings, these are a bunch of problems that you would be like, all right, how am I going to deal with all these issues? Because if you want to say, well, what you intend, what you think is how you like say what word you're actually you're speaking, which one you're tokening, which one you actually use, then you've got a problem because you've got all these sort of like, well, how do you actually individuate the word? Because there's too many problems. You didn't like the point where we don't know their stance. Yeah, this is just, I mean, it's not a long paper, and it's like, that's fair. And they said, they got a paper forthcoming. So what is it? Like Miller forthcoming. One of these forthcomings. So, oh, okay. So it looks like they've got 2 papers coming in like 2 books on philosophy of language right here. I know you guys can't see behind the rating stream, but they've got like 2 papers coming out in books in Oxford University Press. So yeah, it's coming out. So so this is all like set up for that. They were like, all right, let me go get out all these other arguments on this one point in this other paper. So, because the other papers are probably more focused on other things. Okay, but if anyone else wants to get their rating in, now's the time. What did I say? I said 2 knives and a navel. Yeah, that's fine. Then I'll find somewhere to drop you off. Decent philosophy. It's just like decent sort of like analytic or philosophy of language, if you will, where it's just like we're going over like a bunch of arguments where the style is like, all right, you might find some like different avenues. Even the author said here, there are, hey, Rod Durpin, thank you for the rating. They said, look, there might be some different stuff. Like they said, the argument isn't going to be a knockdown argument at every spot, but they're just going to be really painful, like bullets to bite, if you want to go in any one of these directions. And the fact that they gave so many arguments is sort of just overwhelming the oppositions. Like, yeah, if you want to stick to the intentionalist account, it's just going to be really hard. You have to find some very small, like entry into this discussion where you stick to one really narrow line and be like, well, this is where intention actually works, and like where you can get around all these problems. So that's kind of like the style here, and it works fine. It's just not like, you're just going through a laundry list of problems that they've identified.